Alright, we're on chapter 2, I believe. Chapter 2 of this lovely book. Let's get it started. Why keep our audience waiting? Now, I forgot what page number chapter 2 was, as I was expecting it to be marked at the beginning, at the top. So we did the leadership ambition gap, I believe. It's a hard book to turn. We were at sit at the table. A few years ago, I hosted a meeting for Treasury Secretary Tim Gaither at Facebook. We invited 15 executives from across Silicon Valley for breakfast and a discussion about the economy. Secretary Gaither arrived with 4 members of his staff, 2 senior and 2 more junior, and we all gathered in our nice conference room. After the usual milling around, I encouraged the attendees to help themselves to the buffet and to take a seat. Our invited guests, mostly men, grabbed plates and food and sat down at the large conference table. Secretary Gaither's team, all women, took their food last and sat in chairs off to the side of the room. I motioned for the women to come sit at the table, waving them over so they would feel welcomed. They demurred and remained in their seats. The 4 women had every right to be at this meeting, but because of their seating choice, they seemed like spectators rather than participants. I knew I had to say something, so after the meeting, I pulled them aside to talk. I pointed out that they should have sat at the table even without an invitation. Next page. But when publicly welcomed, they most certainly should have joined. At first, they seemed surprised, and then they agreed. It was a watershed moment for me. A moment when I witnessed how an internal barrier can alter a woman's behavior. A moment when I realized that in addition to facing institutional obstacles, women face a battle from within. When I gave a TED Talk on how women can succeed in the workforce, I told this story to illustrate how women hold themselves back, literally choosing to watch from the sidelines. And yet, as disappointed as I was that these women made these choices, I was also deeply understanding of their insecurities and what drew them to the side of the room and then kept them glued to those chairs. My senior year of college, I was inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Honorary Society at the time. Harvard and Radcliffe had separate chapters, so many ceremonies was for only women. The keynote speaker, Dr. Peggy McIntosh from the Wellesley Centers for Women, gave a talk called Feeling Like a Fraud. She explained that many people, but especially women, feel fraudulent when they are praised for their accomplishment, including the Japanese. Japanese never, "Oh, sir, thank you. Thank you, I do not deserve this. I do not deserve this, sir." Japanese do the same goddamn thing. Instead of feeling worthy of recognition, they feel undeserving and guilty, as if a mistake has been made. Despite being high achievers, even experts in their fields, women can't seem to shake the sense that it's only a matter of time until they are found out for who they really are, imposters with limited skills or abilities. I thought it was the best speech I had ever heard. I was leaning forward in my chair, nodding vigorously. Carrie Weber, my brilliant and totally not a fraud roommate, was doing the same. At last, someone was articulating exactly how I felt. Every time I was called on in class, I was sure that I was about to embarrass myself. Every time I took a test, I was sure that it was gonna go badly. And every time I didn't embarrass myself or even excelled, I believed that I had fooled everyone yet again. One day soon, the jig will be up, 'cause you can fool some people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all of the time. And now you see the light. So stand up for your rights. I've been brewing my own blend of homemade elderberry wine so I can get in the mood of this book all properly. Don't mind me if I take a quick sip. Woo! Boy! Where were we again? Oh, you can't fool all the people all the time. At that point, reception that followed the ceremony, and after battle, party for nerds, so I fit right in. I told one of my male classmates about Dr. McIntosh's fantastic speech explaining how we all feel like frauds. He looked at me, confused, and asked, why would that be interesting? Carrie and I later joked that the speech to the men was probably something like how to cope in a world where no everyone is as smart as you. The phenomenon of capable people being plagued by self-doubt as a name, the imposter syndrome. Both men and women are sustainable to the imposter syndrome, but women tend to experience more intensely and more limited by it. Even the widely successful writer and actress Tina Fey has admitted to these feelings. She once explained to a British newspaper, "The beauty of the imposter syndrome is your facility between extreme egomania and a complete feeling of I'm a fraud. Oh God, they're on to me. I'm a fraud." So, just to try to ride the egomania when it comes and enjoy it. And then slide through the idea of fraud. Seriously, I've just realized that almost everyone is a fraud, so I try not to feel too bad about it. For women, feeling like a fraud is a symptom of a greater problem. We consistently underestimate ourselves. Multiple studies in multiple industries show that women often judge their own performance as worse than it actually is. While men judge their performance as better than it actually is. Assessments of students in a surgery rotation found that when asked to evaluate themselves, the female students gave themselves lower scores than the male students. Despite factually evaluations that showed the women outperformed the men. A survey of several thousand potential political candidates, why are we getting political, revealed that despite having comparable credentials, the men were about 60% more likely to think that they were very, very qualified. Yes, I am very qualified. To run for political office. A study of close to 1,000 Harvard law students found that it is almost every category of skills relevant to practicing law. Women gave themselves lower scores than men did. Ever worse, when women evaluate themselves in front of other people or in stereotypically male domains, their underestimations can become even more pronounced. Ask a man to explain his success and he will typically credit his own innate qualities and skills. As a woman, the same question and she will attribute her success to external factors, insisting she did well because she worked really hard, or got lucky, or help from others. Men and all women also differ when it comes to explaining failure. When a man fails, he points to factors like, I didn't study enough. I should have studied some more. Not interested in that kind of subject matter. No, sorry. When a woman fails, she'd be more likely to believe it's due to inherent lack of ability, and in situations where a man and a woman each receive negative feedback, the woman's self-confidence and self-esteem drop to a much greater degree than that of the male. The internalization of failure and the insecurity it breeds hurt future performance, so this pattern has serious long-term consequences. And it's not just women who are through these tough times on themselves. Colleagues and the media are also quick to credit external factors for a woman's achievements. When Facebook filed to go publicly, the New York Times ran an article that kindly reminded me and everyone else that I had been lucky and had been had by powerful mentors along the way. Journalists and bloggers rose up to highlight the double standard, pointing out the New York Times rarely subscribed men's success to having been lucky. But the Times didn't say anything that I had not already told myself 1,000 times. At every stage of my career, I had attributed my success to my luck and my hard work and help from my friends and my family. My insecurity began as most insecurities do. In high school, I attended a big public high school in Miami. Think Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That was far more concerned with preventing fights in the halls and keeping drugs out of the bathrooms than with academics. When I was accepted into Harvard, many of my high school classmates asked me why I would want to go to a school filled with geeks. Then they would stop short, remember who they were talking to, and sheepishly walk away without waiting for an answer, realizing that they already knew why I wanted to go to Harvard. Freshman year of college was a huge shock for me. First semester, I took a course called The Concept for the Hero in Hellenic Civilization, which was nicknamed Heroes for Zeros. I didn't have a burning desire to study Greek mythology, but it was the easiest way to fulfill the literature requirement. The professor began the first lecture by asking which students had read these books before. I whispered to my friend next to me, "What books?" "The Iliad and the Odyssey, of course," she replied. Almost every single hand went up. Not mine. The professor had then asked, "And who has read these books in the original?" And I asked, "What original?" I asked my friend again. "The Homeric Greek," she replied. A good third of the class kept their hands up. It seemed pretty clear that I was one of the zeros. A few weeks later, my professor of political philosophy assigned a few page paper. I was panicked. I was panicked. 5 whole pages. I had only written one paper of that length in high school, and it was a year-long project. How could anyone write 5 pages in just 1 week? I stayed in every night, plugging away, and based on the time I put in, I should have gotten an A for effort. I got a C. It's virtually impossible to get a C at Harvard if the assignment is turned in. I'm not exaggerating. This was the equivalent of failing grade school. I went to see my dorm protector, who worked at the admissions office. She told me that I had been admitted to Harvard for my personality, not my academic potential. Very comforting. I buckled down and I worked harder. And by the end of this semester, I learned how to write 5-page papers, but no matter how well I did it academically, I always felt like I was about to get... What was she about to get? What was she about to get? We're talking about a character who's got imposter syndrome, who's down in college. And she's working really hard, and it seems like it's just grade school to her all over again, so she's pretty comfortable in her lane. She mentioned a bit earlier this whole thing about how women should stay in their lane, do as your brain says to maintain. Excuse me, but I'm a bit tad busy rolling myself a cigarette for the moment being. As a man, I do tend to do what I want to do. So I may be reading a book, but I will take a break to smoke a cigarette and drink some of my sweet homemade Prahovian Dacian vampire wine. Come down to Dacia today to drink elderberry stock vampire wine. Yes, for Dracula and drug.
What's really going down inside? Looking for the dirty soap, it's the days of our lives. Each leave the high from the start. I ain't calling these can't happen on its own. So who's following the popular opinion? No retroactives activated, still ain't never changed. Even when the haters hate it, no jams of 4-5 sounded modern for the time. This life spit I live is gonna outlive my lifetime. It's just a lifeline, hit to the spiritual. Hop to the knowledge and just swim to the depth. out through the wit and never giving, always giving my all. In the lab, in the studio, can see me for days. The mad scientist hitting rewind. Just to play all day. The way that I flow, the way that you know what's up. Feeding off diversions, gotta chill, y'all relate. Get the pressure off the shoulders for the cabin heavyweights. Not GSP Merlin or Felician Hurlin. I write a training words, but these rhymes are the blind. Many times you hear I'm bound, so much sugar rockin' blind. I'm just a steady grind, so this life ain't left behind. Honestly, never mind, petty signs of the moon. When you hourglass sand, can't force time's hand. All we know is the past. Theories and our plans, vision not forgets reality. Once I leave the lab, my words leave the pad to my tongue, to the stand with the mic, to the speaker, to your ear, check the feature presentation, homie. The world can be lonely, with the difference and phony. It's the present day delivery, style and creativity. It's who I really am, and what you really gonna see. Trapped up in the lab, in the studio, can see me for days. The mad scientist hitting rewind, just play all day. The way that I flow, the way that you know what's up.
Alright, so we're going back to the book. From what I remember, we were reading a book by a lady in California who seems to have imposter syndrome. And recently she's been admitted to Harvard University. And on her first day in class, she apparently did not read the books that were assigned to be read, or has no experience with them since before. Excuse the volume quality, my voice may be busting through the door again. That might fix the issue. Now, so far the book has been read from the perspective of a woman. and I have seen through her eyes the world that we live in. It is a gift that I have. I will try to resonate more of my own essence into the words, as I have done so far. She had to write 5 pages, and she was worried that she's going to get caught as an imposter for not really knowing anything. It wasn't until I had heard the Phi Beta Kappa speech about self-doubt that it struck me. The real issue was not that I felt like a fraud, but that I could feel something deeply and profoundly, and to me it was completely wrong. Something deep and profound felt wrong. I should have misunderstood that this kind of self-doubt was more common from females for growing up with my brother. David is 2 years younger than I am, and one of the people in the world whom I respect and love the most. At home, he splits childcare duties with his wife 50-50. At work, he's a pediatric neurosurgeon whose days are filled with heart-wrenching life and death decisions. Although we had the same upbringing, David has always been more confident. Once, back in high school, we both had Saturday night dates that had canceled on us. In the late afternoon, I spent the rest of the weekend moping around the house, wondering what was wrong with me that my date had stood me up. David laughed off the rejection, announcing that the girl missed out on a great thing. He went off to play basketball with his friends. Luckily, I had my younger sister, and she was wise and empathetic, way beyond her years, to console me. After a few years later, David joined me at college when I was a senior and he was a sophomore. Her sister was more pure, uncorrupted by age. And to wash off the corruption of age, we must age. My roommate, Carrie, also took the class, which was a huge help since she was a cooperative literature major. So she was a major. Carrie went to all of these lectures and read all of these assigned books, all 10 of them, and in the original languages. And by then, I knew what those were. I went to almost all of the lectures and read all of the books in English. David went to 2 lectures, read 1 book, and then marched himself up to our room to get tutored for the final exam. We all sat together for the test, scribbling furiously for 3 hours in our little blue books. While we walked out, we asked one another how it went. I was upset. I had forgotten to connect the fraudulent ID to Schopenhauer's conception of the will. Schopenhauer's conception of the will. Carrie, too, was concerned and confessed that she hadn't adequately explained Kant's distinction between the sublime and the beautiful. We turned to my brother. How did he feel about the test? I got the flat one, he announced. The flat one? We asked. Yeah, he said, the flat A. He was right, he did get the flat one. Actually, we all got the flat A's on the exam. My brother was not overconfident. Carrie and I were overly insecure. These experiences taught me that I needed to make both an intellectual and an emotional adjustment. I learned over time that while it was hard to shake feelings of self-doubt, I could understand that there was a distortion. I would never possess my brother's effortless confidence, but I could challenge the notion that I was constantly headed for failure. When I felt like I was not capable of doing something, I remind myself that I did not fail all of my exams in college, or even one. I learned to distort the undistorted distortion. We all know supremely confident people who have no right to feel that way. We also know all the people who could do so much more if only they believed in themselves. Like so many things, a lack of confidence can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know how to convince anyone to believe deep down that there is the best person for the job is themselves. Not even myself can I convince that I am the best person for the job. But to this day, I joke that I wish I could spend a few hours feeling as self-confident as my brother, the dead one. It must feel so good like receiving a cosmic flat one every day. When I don't feel confident, one tactic I've learned is that it sometimes helps to fake it. I discovered this was when I was an aerobic instructor in the 1980s, which meant a silver leotard, leg warmers, and a shiny headband, all of which were perfectly matched with my big hair. Influenced by the Gospel of Jane Fonda, aerobics also meant smiling solidly for full hours. Some days the smiles can come naturally, other ways I wish I had a lousy mood and I had to fake it. Yet, after an hour of forcing yourself to smile, I often felt cheerful. Many of us have experienced being angry with someone and then having to pretend everything's great in public. My husband Dave and I have our moments, and just when we are getting into it, it would be the time to go to a friend's house for dinner. We put on our everything's great smiles, and amazingly, after a few hours, it often is. Research backs up this fake it till you get feel it strategy. One study found that when people assume a high purpose, for example, taking up space by spreading their limbs for just 2 minutes, their dominance hormones levels, testosterone, went up and their stress hormones, cortisol, went down. As a result, they feel more powerful and in charge, and showed a greater tolerance for risk. A simple change in posture led to a significant change in attitude. I would not suggest that anyone move beyond feeling confident into arrogant or boastfulness. No one likes that in men or women. But feeling confident or pretending that you feel confident is necessary to reach your opportunities. It's a cliche, but opportunities are rarely offered. They are seized. During the 6.5 years I worked at Google, I hired a team of 4,000 employees. I did not know all of them personally, but I knew the top 100 or so. What I noticed over the years was that for most of the part, the men reached for opportunities much more quickly than women. When we announced the opening of a new office or the launch of a new project, the men were banging down my door to explain why they should lead the charge. Men were also more likely to chase a growth opportunity even before a new opening was announced. They were impatient about their own development and believed that they were capable of doing more, and they were often right, just like my brother. The women, however, were more cautious about changing roles and seeking out new challenges. I often found myself trying to persuade them to work in new areas. Go get that money home. I had countless conversations where women responded to this encouragement by saying, "I'm just not sure I'd be good at that." Or, "That sounds exciting, but I've never done anything like it before." Let's try this one on for face. "I still have a lot to learn in my current career role." I rarely, if ever, heard these kinds of comments from men. "I still have a lot to learn in my current role." "That sounds exciting, but I've never done anything like it before." "I'm just not sure I'd be good at that." A man squeaks when he says, "I'm just not sure I'll be good at that." We can not say that without whispering our last words. Given how fast the world moves today, grabbing opportunities is more important than ever. Few managers have the time to carefully consider all the applicants for a job, much less convince more reticent people to apply. Much less more convince reticent people to apply. And increasingly, opportunities are not well defined, but instead come from someone jumping in to do something. That something then becomes his job. When I first joined Facebook, I was working with a team to answer the critical question of how best to grow our business. The conversations were getting heated, with many people arguing their own positions strongly. We ended the week without consensus. Dan Rose, leader of our deal team, spent the weekend gathering market data that allowed us to reframe the conversation in analyticals. His effort broke the logjam. I then expanded Dan's responsibility to include product marketing. Take initiative pays off. It is hard to visualize someone as a leader if she is always waiting to be told what to do. Padma Sri Warrior, Cisco's chief technology officer, was asked by the Huffington Post, "What's the most important lesson you've learned from a mistake you've made in the past?" Padma Shri Warrior responded, "I said no to a lot of opportunities when I was just starting out because I thought, that's not what my degree is in, or I don't know about that domain. In retrospect, at a certain point, it's your ability to learn quickly and contribute quickly that matters. You have to take opportunities and make an opportunity fit for you, rather than other way around. The ability to learn is the most important quality a leader can have." Virginia Rometty, IBM first female CEO, told the audience at the 2011 Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit chat. Ali Akbar. Early in her career, she was offered a big job. She worried that the proper experience she had, and told the recruiter that she needed to think about that. That night, she discussed the offer with her husband, who pointed out, "Do you think a man would have ever answered that question that way? Get to the chopper." "What it taught me was you have to be very confident," Jenny said. "Even though you're so self-critical inside about what it is you may or may not know, and that to me leads to taking risks. I continue to be alarmed not just as how we as women fail to put ourselves forward, but also at how we fail to notice and to correct for this gap, and that we conclude as me. A few years ago, I have a talk on gender issues to a few hundred employees at Facebook. After my speech, I took questions for as long as time permitted. Later that afternoon, I came back to my desk where a young woman was wanting and waiting to talk to I learned something today," she said. "What?" I asked, feeling good, as I figured she was about to tell me how my words had touched her. Instead, she said, "I learned to keep my hands up." She explained that towards the end of my talk, I had said that I would take only 2 more questions. I did so, and then she put her hand down, along with all of the other women, but several men kept their hands up, and since hands were still waving in the air, I took more questions, only from the men. Instead of my words touching her, her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I was giving a speech on gender issues, I had been blind to one myself. If we want a world with greater equality, we need to acknowledge that women are less likely to keep their hands up. We need institutions and individuals to notice and correct this behavior by encouraging, promoting, and championing more women. And women have to learn to keep their hands up, because when they lay others, lower them down, even managers with best intentions might no, start their hands up. When I start working for Larry Summers, then I put my hands up as a chief economist at the World Bank with my hands up. He was married to a tax attorney, Vicky. He was very supportive of Vicky's career, and he used to urge her to build like a boy. His view was that men considered any time they spent thinking about an issue, even in the time in the shower, as billable hours. If I'm thinking about what you got me thinking about while I'm taking a shower, you owe me money for the water running out of my tap. That's bill like a boy. And this book is brought to you by Volation Voivod Elderberry Sok Wine, only what the vampires drink. Ah, the taste of life. Brought to you by Dacia. This book, however, is brought to you by the wonderful world and the people at Google. Yes, sir, I work for Google. I'd make audiobooks and drink wine. Best job in the world. His wife and her female colleagues, however, would decide that they were not at their best on a given day and discount hours they spent at their desks to be fair to the client, which lawyers were more valuable to that firm. To make his point, Larry told them the story of a renowned Harvard Law School professor who was asked by a judge to itemize a bill. The professor responded that he could not because he was so often thinking about two things at once. Even now, I'm a long way from mastering the art of feeling confident. In August 2011, Forbes put out its annual World's 100 Most Powerful Women's list. It's savvy enough to know that the list wasn't based on scientific formula, and that magazines love these features because they generate lots of page views as readers click through each name. Still, I was shocked, no, horrified to learn that Forbes ranked me as the 5th most powerful woman in the world, right after German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, and the CEO of PepsiCo, Indra Nooyi. This put me ahead of First Lady Michelle Obama and Indian politician Sonia Gandhi. Absurd, my own mother called to say, "Well, dear, I do think you are very powerful, but I am not sure you are more powerful than Michelle Obama." You think? Far more feeling powerful, I felt embarrassed and exposed when colleagues at Facebook stopped me in the halls to say congratulations. I pronounced this ridiculous. When friends posted the link on Facebook, I asked them to take it down. After a few days, my longtime executive assistant, Camille Hart, summoned me into a conference room and closed the door. This was serious. She told me that I was handling the Forbes things poorly and that I needed to stop subjecting anyone who brought up the list to a deep tribe on its absurdity. I was showing too many people how uncomfortable I felt and revealing my insecurities. Instead, I needed to simply say thank you. We all need colleagues like Camille, who was honest enough to point out my less than gracious response. She was right. Whether the list was ridiculous or not, I didn't write it. I didn't have to react so negative to it. I doubt a man would have felt so overwhelmed by others' perceptions of his own power. No, we wouldn't. I know that my success comes from hard work, help from others. I know that my success comes from hard work and helping others, at being at the right place at the right time with the right wine. I feel deeply proclaimed to my enduring sense of gratitude to those who have given opportunities for all of us to blossom. I recognize the sheer luck of being born into my family in the United States, rather than one of the many places in the world where women are denied basic rights. I believe that all of us, men and women alike, should fight to bring this knowledge of injustice, to bring good fortune, and to thank the people who have helped us. No one accomplishes anything alone. But moving on back to the days of modern times. But I also know that in order to continue to grow and challenge myself, I have to believe in my own abilities. I still have to face situations that I fear are beyond my capabilities. I still have days when I feel like I am a fraud. And I still sometimes find myself spoken over and discounted while men sitting next to me are not. But now, I know how to take a deep breath and keep my hands up. I have learned to sit at the table. Kumbaya. Imua. Mau aloha. Aikana.
Confidence, man, is not what you want, man. Humiliation, procrastination, that's what your dedication on the next station while you listen to the radio.
Everywhere, Musa, M-U-S-A, Alchemy, A-L-K-E-M-I, pop, obviously pop. Shout out Y.O., big up Yonkers. Woo woo! Coming up next, though, we going up to the T.O. We going from Y.O. to T.O.